Sally, I have the last few pictures are Yes. Yeah. I was going to do that. Yeah, now would be a good time. That'll encourage them to come sit too. Who are our at-large members? Because I don't know that we reminded them they helped Larry count. Terry, Kelly. Terry, Kelly. Deb. Okay, so none of them there. Well, then I'll ask Larry just. Okay. Ready to get elected? You got your campaign speech ready? Sure. You got to go up there and give it 5 minutes.
Thanks for talking about Allie during communion. You know, all the broken pieces, fragmented people.
Ancestor put me on. There we go. Okay. Hopefully everybody who's going to attend the meeting is in here now. I see a few in the back. If they would please come in before we get the meeting started. Glenn is back there. Okay. There were some handouts outside in a fellowship hall on that table. They have the agenda. They have some of the same things that have been sent out ahead of time via email and a MailChimp and all. And a few of them, about 25 or 30 of them, have the actual bylaws attached. If you could share, if you want to read those off a paper. It's a lot of paper to have to print off, so we tried to keep the number down. And again, they were online. They still are on there. Or links so that you can see all of the documents, the proposed budget, the list of the proposed trustees, youth, and officers, and all of the other things we'll be talking about today. So I am going to officially call this meeting to order. And we have a couple of little housekeeping matters because we met last year totally on virtually. So we had no ways other than people putting in some comments through the virtual links and all as to approval of the minutes. They were approved, but at that time, what we did say is that we would ratify the minutes from November 10th, 2019. I'm sure you remember what we did back then, but they are printed out, and we just need a motion for ratification of those minutes from November 10th, 2019. Do I have a motion to ratify those? Richard? Right, and I think Ann's taking notes. And since she's looking this way, if you could say your name when you make a motion or a second, it would help her out a lot. So we have a motion to ratify the November 10th, 2019 minutes. Do we have a second? John Overton. All right. Those in favor, aye. Opposed, the same. The minutes from November 10th, 2019 have been ratified. Now we have the minutes from last year, November 15, 2020. Those were also printed, and they also have been online. We need to have a motion to approve, hopefully you've had plenty of time to look at those. Motion to approve the November 15th, 2020 meeting of the congregation. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Don Darnell.
Don has moved. Do I have a second? Brandon, I think she knows. Okay, there's been a motion and a second to approve the November 15th, 2020 minutes. Those in favor, aye. Those opposed, the same. The minutes have been approved. Okay. To give you a reminder, since we haven't been together for a congregational or a special meeting for going on the second year, what is presented to you today in this meeting has come through the board, through all the committees to the board, and the board is recommending to this congregational meeting approval of the items that are on the agenda. The first, and to remind you also, we don't vote after each one of the presentations and discussions of what's up. Your ballot will have all of the items that are to be voted on, the officers, trustees, youth representative, and then each of the other items of the budget proposal, the bylaws, the articles of incorporation, and the bequest policy. So we will vote all at the end of all of the presentations of the information from the appropriate committees and those who have worked on these for the board. The first to be discussed is the presentation of the proposed officers, trustees, and representatives. You have a list there. I do not have a list. I'm not sure what I did for it. So, oh, there they are. I have it. Okay. Chair. I know who chair is. Doug Pierce. Vice Chair Larry Coase. Treasurer David Lester. Financial Secretary Doug Reed. Recording Secretary Ann Burnett. Trustees Gary Fox, Steve Kruk, Tori Holtz, Ron Routh. Members at large Terry Hendrickson, Mike Richardson, Elizabeth Squires, Youth Representative Allison Lester. Those are the slate presented by the board. On your ballot, there is at the bottom a line item where if you want to write in, but I would let you know that you must have talked to that person ahead of time and have their permission to nominate them for whatever office that is. So with that, that will be on the ballot. I will go to the next where I'm going to have help from others on the board. And the first item is the proposed budget. And Gary Fox is going to talk to that item.
Well, thanks, Sally. It's been quite a year and many challenges. Our budget process is kind of that same way. We've had our challenges, but I'll try to go through this pretty quickly because in spite of those challenges, the process and things is pretty similar to what we do every year, and we have quite a more robust agenda than we usually have at these meetings with some other things to get to. So relatively quickly. The budget, we view it as just a tool to help our committees fund and implement their priorities. Stewardship and Finance is kind of the committee that's in charge of preparing the budget, but we do not set the priorities for what this church does. The committees and the board do that, and we work collaboratively with them to try to achieve a doable budget. As I said, it's a collaborative process. We start usually in July. S&F reviews the available information as of the end of July and makes a very preliminary report to the board at the August meeting, get some feedback on it. Then in September, we update the information, go back to the board with an updated preliminary budget and get more feedback from the board. Are we on the right track? Should we be looking at this or that? And then in October, comes down to the crunch time. We've got to get it done. So we prepare a final update and a recommendation from the committee to the board. The process is also iterative with a goal of getting to a balanced budget. We look at what changes we anticipate may have in revenues and also what adjustments, deletions, or additions we can make in expenses. So I think I'll just try to go through this in kind of an orderly fashion. Take the narrative budget that all of you hopefully have a copy of this in beautiful colors, living color. It's just tries to take, a budget can be very boring. If for some people they're into budgets, it's nice to really look at the numbers, but for others, this puts kind of a human face onto those budget numbers. So we budget by various categories and then put those together in worship. That's a really important part of what we do, and we have the biggest share of our expenses dedicated to worship, about 25% of our budget. This includes expenses for personnel, music staff and resources, worship decor, supplies, and so forth. Administration, that's always one of those that seems like, gosh, do we really need to spend much money on administration? What do we get for that? But here we have staff support, the office support, office supplies, copiers, internet, phone costs, various things like that. They're just necessary for administrative reasons to help keep our church together and functioning so that our committees can do their work as well. Christian ed, a fairly small piece, only 9%, but very important. Our costs here are generally low. We have inexpensive and created curriculum. And we also get donations for a lot of supplies, snacks, and things like that, but quite a bit of staff support here towards making those programs successful. This is one that's really taken a hit due to COVID. We're really hopeful that soon we will be able to come back and really reinvigorate our Christian education program and start meeting in person. I guess COVID will kind of determine that. We've got to be able to do it safely. Our youth program also is fairly small. And again, it's not that it's such a small program, but it's fairly small budget impacts because there's a lot of donation of time and resources, the free weekly meals provided by members of the congregation, and a lot of our youth activities. They do fundraising things and have a separate youth fund with separate donations to that. So it's not really handled through the budget, but our support services to the youth are included in the budget. Property is kind of an indispensable thing. It's pretty much a fixed expense. We have a wonderful, beautiful building. The trustees work really hard to keep it that way, but there certainly are expenses involved in doing that. The trustees really work to keep our costs down, a lot of volunteer labor on maintenance and even some improvements and repairs. So I really like the picture here at the bottom. There's a person there on that yellow lawnmower that has been around doing trustee work and trustee type work for so many years. He's maybe scaled it back a little bit here on fixing everything here that was ever been broken, but he's still very involved. And so many thanks to Arnie for all of his years and hours of time. And for all those years, Arnie, instead of a gold watch, you get a picture in our annual budget. So just think, if you stay dedicated for years and years, you may get your picture in our annual budget in the future sometime. And then our last two areas, evangelism and membership, that covers kind of our fellowship with one another and intentional efforts to reach out to new people, include them in the life of the church. And again, as Janine said, that's taken a pretty big hit through COVID and our inability to get together, but we really look forward soon to returning to some of those member lunches, bonfires, potluck suppers, come home for Christmas, the list of things that are in there. And outreach is our ministry's goal to lead our church in mission and service to this community and the world. We dedicate a significant portion of our budget, about 10%, or it is 10% of our total giving, the general fund giving the previous year, to fund mission projects, provide support to our region and general church, the Christian Conference Center, and offer assistance to those in need. Some of it goes outside, some of it goes to local activities right here in Norwalk. It's a passion of our church, and we see it some of our most visible church programs, the mobile food pantry, ELL, membership in Amos, many projects and ministries of the Norwalk Ministerial Association. All of that are detailed in this document. And now to get to the recommended budget, what's on the back page, the last part of it, this nice multicolored as well. It's set up as has been in the past, right in the middle. The white columns down the middle is the recommended budget, and then the percent of totals listed there that are also included in the narrative budget. And then on either side of it, in green, to the right is the 2021 budget. On the left is the estimate. It's our actual so far, and then sort of an educated guess at what the expenses will be for the rest of the year, as well as the income. And then just for reference, kind of on the farther right and the farther left, the 2020 budget and actual expenses. On our revenue receipts part, we started out, we thought we'll typically start looking at the same as the 2021 budget, as last year's previous budget. The October board meeting, we're clear to the last, ready to finalize a budget recommendation. And we found out about expected increases in our property insurance, all these natural disasters going on all over the country, wildfires, floods, storms, all of this really impacts property insurance rates. Even though we haven't had a fire or a tornado or a flood here in our church, we're affected by those rates that happen all over the country. And so they've notified us anywhere from a 10 to 25% increase in our property insurance for next year. And then most of you probably also heard Mid-American is saying because of a shortage in whatever issues, but natural gas is expected to go up significant increases all as well next week. So we did add some costs back into the budget for that, which required an adjustment of just over 1% to the general giving to get the receipts to balance out as a balanced budget. And again, that was one of those adjustments. We thought we were there before we got to the October board meeting. And expenses, we went through working with the committees. Some of our expenses have been down in certain areas during the COVID. Can we do our job or function and have our programs we want if we cut some of those funds out, or other ones, or we need them in there so that we can get back to have full levels for those committees? And we went through and made cuts where we could. We totaled those without the increases in insurance and gas. We would have cut enough expenses that from the 2021 budget that we would have eliminated the deficit. Last year, we did present and you voted on and approved a budget that had a $3,500 deficit. We could have had a balanced budget, but we had to throw back in some money this year because of those increases in the budget under property expenses. You can go down specifically and look in each of those categories. Administration, there's just not much change there. We did increase a little bit our online giving expenses. They've exceeded our budgeted amount the last few years. A lot of people have switched to that, which is a good thing, I think, for the convenience and broader support. But they do carry some fees, and over the course of a year, that's been around $1,250 or so. And so we did increase $150 there. I talked about the property. We decreased some other things, but as a net, there's about a $1,700 increase there. In worship, we made some cuts to music and supplies, so a total of about $500 decrease. Christian ed, just a minor cut there that we don't think will affect what we do. Same for youth. Evangelism and membership, we've carried some funding through there in our budgets that we've not really spent. We did not eliminate those funds, but we reduced them, so that's about a $2,000 decrease. And finally, and outreach, no change. So that represents the same amount as was in the 2021 budget. So the net total of that is a $1,100 decrease from the budgeted expenses for 2021. So our total for 2022 is $226,416 in expenses, and total revenues back on the front side of $226,425 for a net income of a $9. So if everything goes perfectly according to the budget, which I'm sure it will, we would have $9 left over for next year. Now, we know that there are challenges here. We do right at this time have about $45,000 in reserves. And we could have presented another budget deficit, but partly because of that, we have some cushion. The board wanted to have a balanced budget, so voted to challenge the church to finish this year with strong giving and reach our goal of $217,000 and then carry that giving into next year. We hope that we'll be able in many ways to return to more normal services and activities. If we meet those challenges, in general, there's not an absolute specific there, but if we meet that in general, the board would consider mid-year pay raises for our staff. It's kind of generally, probably across the board, don't know, but the board would want to consider that. For this budget, we're not recommending that because of the difficult financial conditions, but we recognize that they're hardworking staff and deserve to be compensated fairly. So we're hopeful that we could do that. Currently, our general fund giving, here's the reality of it. We're about $18,000 below budget and about $9,000 below last year at this time. Our expenses are about $4,000 below budget, so that closes the gap to about $14,000. So how do we get there? The last piece that I want to go over here is just in letter format, a chart that gives a breakdown of our general fund giving for 2020 based on information from the financial secretary. In 2020, our total giving increased by about $2,000 over 2019. But the number of people giving over $1,000 decreased from 53 to 45, and the total number of givers overall decreased from 125 to 95. I think that decrease, those numbers really talk about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and other issues that may be for different people for different reasons. During the previous 4 years, we averaged right around 125 givers. So we're down significantly there, but the total dollars are up. If you look at the chart, it shows the different steps from $100 to $100, $101 to $200, to $500 to $1,000 to $2,000, $4, $6, $8, $10, or greater than $10. That's kind of a breakdown. And like a lot of things, it's really this broad-based support. There's not any one line of that chart that completes our budget. It's every line in there, whether you're on the bottom line, the middle line, the top line. It's everybody together making this work. Just like our successful capital campaign, it's broad-based. No one giver is more important than any other. So wherever step you might be on this chart, please prayerfully consider increasing your commitment to the next step or just higher up in the step you're already on, like a number of people did in 2020. So far, I think 2021 is holding pretty close to that. So no big surprises there. We know what it is and what to do. I urge you to make a formal commitment with the commitment cards. As Travis said, we'll be collecting in a couple of weeks and turn that back into the office. It's just, I thought Marty's message this morning was right on target. This is a big challenge. It's a big budget. And if we approach it in fear, exhaustion, it's too big, we can't do it, we just don't have the resources to do it, we just can't accomplish it, we won't. But if we approach it with a sense of wholeness, that taken together, this church as a whole, we have the resources, we have the people, the talent, we can do this so that we can continue providing the wonderful mission and programs and services to each other, to our community, and to the world around us that really needs us so badly. May it be so. And now I would be glad to take any questions or comments directly related to the budget. Yes, Peggy.
I'm wondering, since the board decided not to have Sunday school due to COVID, yet school's going on, ball games going on, people are everywhere, why you continue to run a $20,000 budget from 2020 to 2021, yet you knew you weren't having Christian education or youth. One of them is 18,000, one of them is 20,000. And I understand that's part of the pay of the, but why is that not adjusted in anticipation from 20 to 21, knowing that's what the board decided?
You know, it probably could have been, but it wouldn't have really changed the total numbers. What we do is take our, if you look at the bottom, kind of the bottom of the page, the additional details on the backside of the budget sheet, that's where our various personnel costs are. So those are kind of fixed costs to spread out over all of the programs that the church does. I suspect that in reality, we spent maybe a little less time on Christian ed or some of those things but if we did it, it would have decreased the numbers there, but it would have increased them in others because it would have said, well, that time was spent on some other things. We didn't go through that exercise to do that, so that's why the number's the same. But okay, or maybe I just didn't say it very well, but yeah, all of our people, we did, one of the things we did get the, it's PPL, Personnel Protection Loan, which turned into a grant that helped us. We kept all staff on pay throughout the entire 2020 year, even though we weren't meeting regularly in the building, we didn't have necessary janitorial services, but we kept everybody on payroll. So our payroll expenses, we distribute them over all of the programs in the budget. So if we had cut back the percentages on those two areas, it would have just meant that, well, more of the same time was spent on worship, and maybe it should have been. I think that a lot of time was spent trying to create worship that we can do online and make that more accessible and all those things. So the bottom line is that the total would end up being the same. Is that, am I making that kind of clear? Or?
I would say that we had a huge program going all through 2020 and 2021. And as far as the Christian ed side, the Tuesday afternoon programs were stalled for a little bit, but they kept going and started back up. So I would say that they weren't completely shut off. They continued going. They just maybe weren't as visible as they would.
And some of the online stuff that had to go, I mean, it was still, kids were still participating. It was just, it was different during the time when we had to shut down, I guess.
Sure.
If I may
Yeah.
speak to some of that,
Yeah.
I was a youth leader last year, and during the whole time during COVID, Marty was really awesome about sending out emails from all the kids for texting all of us last year during the COVID time. She would set up a time to meet, she would set up time, an activity for all of us to play. One game that we really liked was Battleship. She set up every week, this is our time to meet, please bring us stuff to share, we'll just meet virtually. It was challenging for us, and it was very frustrating because we couldn't meet in person like everybody else. But at the same time, if we couldn't be there, we could meet on our phone, we could meet via computer. During COVID, the 612 program is what I can speak for. We did not shut down. We were still meeting on Wednesdays, even though it was virtual.
Thanks, Amy. And I think that brings me back to that point that I made, or that I stated in the stewardship and finance and well, for board approval, but we don't decide the priorities or how things are done. We leave that to the committees. How do you provide the services, the programs that you want? And then we try to make the budget support that and sustain that. So, yes, Kate. Sure, you want to come up and read it here with the mic so everybody can hear it? This is fine.
Thanks. I wrote this out because it's hard. I'm voting no on the budget and my narrative as to why. I've heard some things attributed to me that I did not say, so here is what I will say. I am hurt and disappointed by the leadership of NCC. The paid pastors, I guess it starts there. I know many of you don't want to go back this far, but it does. I had requested to visit with Travis and Marty in August 2020 and was told by them they couldn't do it without tears, so I waited. After receiving the letter in November of 2020, I again requested what had become advertised as a porch visit. Travis and Marty did come to visit and had to leave in 45 minutes to get children from school. During that visit, I cautioned them that the church could easily split over their behavior. Travis let me know that anyone who didn't support them through this, well, they would drop a notch in his eyes. I had a conversation with Sally around that time, also expressing my concerns. Since that time and until yesterday, NCC leadership has what appears, from my view, fine with my absence. I haven't heard from Travis, Marty, board leadership, or pastoral partners. When Travis and Marty and Sally knew of my concerns and didn't reach out in a year, it sends a message. Yet, I have heard from others that they know how I'm doing and why I've been absent. Really? Will this be healed? In over a year, I've not had an indication that a desire to reach out to me and others who are disappointed or disenfranchised or absent exists. If I don't initiate, it won't happen. If I do initiate, it may or may not happen. Have things improved in the last year? Not from my vantage. Have I been told to wait as the process unfolds? Yes. My question, how long? Is over a year enough? At what point is there accountability? As you may take from this, I am disappointed, and those are my words.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Kate. Anybody else have comment or question?
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple of things.
You wanna-
Well, first off, this kind of information doesn't pull itself together. Gary works diligently. He's very passionate about this stuff. In addition to doing the work around the church that he does, he takes great care of our finances and cares deeply about it. So we have to take him to this. The other thing I would say is the stretch that this budget asks us to do is roughly 5%. $5, that's only $5 more for every $100 that you give. So if you're a $100 giver, that's only $5 more. If you're a $1,000 giver, that's $50 more. I think that's an amount of money we can all afford. I think the measure of the church is how successful are we being out in community, being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. I've never, in my years here at this church, I don't know when we've been more active we've got English language going on. We've got the global food pantry going on. We're doing more things to help people outside of these walls than we've ever been doing before. Just because we've got good leadership, we've got good workers, and they deserve our support.
Any other comments or questions related specifically to the budget, please? Okay, if not, I'll turn it back over to Sally. We're going to need obviously a motion and thing, or no, we just vote on it on the ballot. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Sally for the rest of the.
Great.
Yeah, I might as well take that page.
This is very touchy. Thanks, Gary, and thanks for all the comments on the budget, because it is the budget that's before the congregation today. The next item is, we don't normally have all of this, but boy, this was a year we decided to do all sorts of stuff, didn't we, David? So David Lester's going to come up and talk to you about the bylaws, proposed amendments to the bylaws, articles of incorporation, charitable bequest and endowment fund. And I can tell you, we didn't know we had a constitution, and we still don't know where it is. So if any of you know where our church's constitution is, please let us know. But David spent just innumerable hours in working through all these, and he'll explain why, what we have accomplished and what we're proposing for a vote today.
Had to go to the store and buy a new book for all my notes on this so I can share. So settle in, it's going to be about 3.5 hours now. No, I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. So first, I want to thank the committee that I had. So Sally approached me and said, oh, we need to fix the bylaws. And I said, I'd help out with it. Then I led it, and then I found a group, and I started getting into it, and it became not just bylaws. The articles of incorporation needed fixed, and then we'll get into all that. So I want to thank, if you're here, go ahead and stand for me. Dan Mundell, Kate Ron, Mark Durham, Jeannie Sullivan, Sally Revley, Janine Schackemeyer, Travis Stanley, and then myself. We were all on that committee. We met several times, so thank you guys very much. It was a lot of work, so thank you. First document we're going to start with, it's the single page front and back. It's got the red letters crossed out on it. It says Articles of Incorporation at the top. So it's been touched, as far as I can tell, 3 times in our church's history. First in the 1860s when it was established. We found a copy of the actual 1860s articles. Then it was touched in 1953. And that's the version you're seeing here with the version there was one change made in 1992 to make the life of Norwalk Christian Church perpetual, not limited based on years. So it used to be that corporations had to restate their articles of incorporations every 50 years, and now the states changed the rules, so we don't have to do that. So the bulk of the changes in this were to clarify a few things and to move operational items out of the articles of incorporation and into the bylaws. So Articles 4 and 5, you see like 90% of it or 95% of it's been crossed out, and it just says refer to the bylaws, because that's where it needs to be. The bylaws are, this is not the operational, this is just the establishment document. So we're trying to move the operational stuff over. And then the last big change was, I think if anybody had on their calendar November 14th for the congregational meeting and then saw the big change to November 7th, this is why. The Articles of Incorporation said we were supposed to be meeting on the first Sunday in November. So we're complying with them as they state today, although we're changing them to say that the church board will determine sometime in November. So a Sunday in November is when the meeting will be called, rather than just saying the first Sunday in November. Does anybody have any questions on the Articles of Incorporation? I'm not going to spend any more time on that one. It was a lot of just moving stuff out of there, and so that it's not conflicting with the bylaws. Okay, so the bylaws. Articles 1, 2, and 3. So we're just going to start, and I'm going to just go through. And this is, like I said, I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. But if you have a question after a section, we'll talk about them. So Articles 1, 2, and 3. We clarified the officers' duties and the makeup of the board, and this was just changes and things, and it was to clarify. So under the old ones, after the election today, technically anybody that wasn't already on the board became members of the board at the next board meeting. And we moved it to at the beginning of the year. So it clarifies what we're doing there. That was kind of the change. When I say makeup of the board, that's what that is. I believe that's about, that Articles 1, 2, and 3, we didn't do a whole lot to those at all. So they've stayed fairly consistent in that area. Does anybody have any questions or comments on Articles 1, 2, and 3? We as a group spent the most time, I think, on Articles 4 and 5. Articles 4 and 5 are the trustees, and then the departments, as we called them for several years. But we've changed them all back to committees. So we no longer have departments, we have committees. We removed the property committee or the property department and combined all of their duties up in with the trustees. We added an executive committee. We've tailored each committee's responsibilities. So a different member in the group reviewed them, and usually they were tied to that group. So like Dan Mundell worked with the trustees and the property committee stuff and kind of got those all worked together. Mark Durham worked with the youth and the Christian ed stuff and the outreach items. And so we tried to figure out who knew the most about each one and had them work with that area and get them so that the duties and responsibilities that are listed are right, or what we're doing, what we should be doing. So we tried to remove some things that weren't really relevant any longer and added a few things in there as well. Under the memorials, wills, and bequests, this is where I said I'll get to the charitable bequest and endowment fund policy. That was part of our memorials committee's bylaws. There was like a page and a half of this stuff in there for them to do with the endowment fund. And we pulled it out of the bylaws because there were things wrong with it that didn't fit Iowa fiduciary laws. And I'm trying to remember what the other terminology was. There were a few other things, but I'll get into the little more of what's changed on that policy. In essence, we just took that policy, moved it out on its own, and then we'll talk about what changes happened to it shortly. So it'll just be no longer a part of the bylaws. And then under the nominating committee, we added that it is a year-long committee, so it's in service through until the next nominating committee is nominated. And then we added the executive committee. We've learned through the COVID side that we needed something to help guide the church in between times. I mean, it was kind of an in-between time. And so we created an executive committee. So the executive committee will be made up of the 5 officers that are elected and the trustees chair. And then they can meet and act on behalf of what the board authorizes them to do at the beginning of the year. So each year the board will authorize the executive committee on what to do or what they can and can't do. And then they can act in emergency situations on behalf of the congregation. So during COVID, when we needed to close the church really fast, there was not a real quick mechanism to do it. And this kind of helps speed some of that up that allows us to do something if we need it. So that was the point of adding the executive committee. So are there any questions or comments on Articles 4 and 5? So the 5 officers of the church, which are listed in Article 1. So the chair of the board, the vice chair of the board, the secretary of the board, the treasurer of the board, the financial secretary of the board, and then we've added the trustee chair to that group as well. So all 6 of those people are elected by the congregation as well. Okay. Articles 6, 7, and 8. If you look at the old ones, you will see that those take up about 2.5 pages of stuff. This maybe 2 pages. This takes up about a page total between all 3. I don't think we did too much to 6 and 7. 8 was the one we tried to just condense it into a little smaller footprint and added that we would allow. So currently, technically, the only way to be in attendance at an annual meeting is to be physically here at the church. And we added that the board can approve alternative means of attendance. So if we want to be able to do an online meeting of the church, we can allow that to be an alternative means. So that was kind of the rationale for that addition as well. So that's all I have on the articles. Are there any other questions or comments on that one? I'm on my last page of notes, so we're almost there. The last one is the charitable bequest and endowment policy. The biggest thing here was it was the chunk we had in the bylaws was reviewed by the Christian Church Foundation, and one of their attorneys reviewed it and said, hey, you're not really able and complying with the Iowa fiduciary law. So that changed about 2007, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And and we never changed our bylaws to reflect that. So this does two things. By creating its own policy, we're fixing that. There are no changes in the use of the funds, so we didn't change how the funds are used, didn't do any of that. It creates a separate group, so this, before it was only the memorials committee that handled it. Now we have endowment fund trustees, so this creates a separate board that has to meet at least twice a year, and that board is made up of the memorials committee, the treasurer, the stewardship and finance chair, and one of the at-large board reps. So again, I think everybody except for the stewardship and finance chair and the memorials committee are elected by the board, or elected by the congregation as a whole. But this group will just be meeting twice a year. Currently, our endowment fund has $11,878. Is that right? Sounds right? $11,878. It's been that way since like 1982. So just so you know, that's it's not very much there, and this group will just be working with the interest that money earns every year. This year it's going to be about $100. And so then they'll be meeting twice a year to make sure we're investing it properly. So right now it just sits in a CD. Is that the best use of that money? What could we, that's the right, so this group will just be meeting on that. And then they'll be voting to make sure that the money is getting dispersed properly out to the appropriate uses. So again, the uses aren't changing. The uses are what they are in our current bylaws. 20% goes straight to the operational budget. 10% goes to outreach. 40% is for the retirement of debts of the congregation or to the future capital needs of the congregation. So our capital fund that we have, and then 30% is an educational fund. That's not been real well defined, and my hope is that when this group meets, that's the first thing they can do is define what that use of that money is to be used for. And then the final change with this one is the amending procedures. So currently, the amending procedures for the bylaws is you as a congregation vote and you say yes, and we've amended them. The charitable bequest section requires 2 congregational votes. And of those 2 votes, we have to have 75% of the congregation that's there approve it both times. And so we're changing that to be that if there's changes to this policy, it will require 3/4 majority of the vote of the church board at 2 successive meetings. So if the board wanted to make a change, they would have to, and they have to give notice of the proposed change to the congregation as well, 2 weeks prior. So they can't just on Sunday night say, oh, we're going to make changes to it tomorrow night at the board meeting. We have to notify you as a congregation 2 weeks before a board meeting that there's on the docket. And then the board can approve it at that docket that meeting and then the following meeting. But then the change doesn't actually happen until the next congregational meeting, which requires then a 3/4 majority vote of the congregation at the next meeting. So there's still notice. It just changes the process a little bit as far as amending this policy. So I don't know that I have anything else. Any other questions on any of these?
How much is in the capital reserve fund? That's not on my list, but you brought that up, so maybe.
Oh, capital reserve fund is right around $5,000 today. Because we've been, well, and we're paying down the debt on the remodel. And so we've been paying it down to try to limit the interest that we're paying on that. And I think the remodel debt's down to $5,000 too. So, but that fund started with about 8, so we're still $8,000 short, $9,000 short of our remodel, paying for the remodel and getting us back to where we were before. So.
Thank you, David.
Thanks to David and the committee and all of the committees that have worked so hard to present all of this to you. Changing bylaws and things is not the most interesting thing in the world. In fact, it's real boring, but it's something that we had to do. We hadn't even looked at them since 2012. So 9 years ago, and it was time just to bring them up so that they work. And because that's our operating document. You have heard from all those involved in the issues before the congregation are going to pass out the ballots, and ask that you fill them out and fold them in half and then pass them. Are you guys going to pick up in the middle? Pass them to the center aisle, and we will have them tallied. And during the little free time or tally, we have a couple of things that we'll present to you just for information purposes, and then give you the results of the vote. So we'll give them time to get that passed out. And I am so glad to see all of you here. You can't know how wonderful it is to sit up here and see a almost totally full, it's as full as it can get with some social distancing. And it was just amazing to me today. Oh, I get to vote too. Yes, yes, yes.
If you need a pen, Mike Richardson's got pens. There. If you want to keep your pen, it's a Norwalk Christian Church pen given to us from Jill Sullivan. So, thank you. On the word.
So when you're finished, if you pass them into the center aisle, I'll give this to Gary. All the ballots in? Nope? Okay. Okay, Travis, do you have, I think there's a little video that, just a short video, and then going to have Glenn Tyler come up for a few minutes after the video, while we're giving us time to get the votes tallied.
And it's just some pictures from this last year. You'll see a lot of kids because that's been our most active program this year. Go Alabama.
Thank you. Glenn?
Write something down and we didn't, so I'll forget something.
Oh.
Trustees, I'll kind of just put one of the fallacies away right now, and that's you don't have to be a handyman and be able to fix things to be a trustee. I'm a great delegator. If I don't do it, I'll find somebody who does. The other thing is ladies on our trustees are a great thing, probably better bookkeepers than we are. We need some help there. It is a 3-year term, but you can decide to stop. I mean, the bylaws do have a way to replace you. So if you find out sometime it doesn't work, we do have a full group this year. What I would like to see us maybe do in the spring is Kathy, Pierce, and Doug, and they bring people come up and do the yard work and stuff usually during the week. Hopefully maybe kind of party off that and see if we can get some people, more people, maybe even use a Saturday morning or two to get some help on some small maintenance around the building. We've got great people in this church. You saw the picture of Don Darnell. Don's not a trustee. He's painted every room in this house at least twice. And he's still doing it. If you've got a special talent or there's something you want to help out on as far as trustees, holler at me. That's what we're here for. Thanks.
Thanks, Glenn, and thanks to everyone who helps around this church. We were talking about our budget. Our budget would be significantly higher if we didn't have those in our church who give of their time and effort, and I know give of their money and never turn any kind of a bill in to help fix this church. So remember that, because that's how this church continues, is because of you all. Now, this is my time to continue to fill in here before the votes come in. And traditionally, this is when the board chair goes, oh, we've done this, 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 and this. But you know what? We've already talked about a lot of those things. Gary went through the narrative budget. We talked about the kinds of things that we were doing in the church. You saw some on the pictures. Allison was talking about the youth groups. So I don't have to list those. We have recognized and made changes in the way we minister through online, virtual, social media, as well as the more traditional in-person activities for those who are comfortable with those contacts. Last year, my comments were more sobering as we had not worshiped in person for months, and the state of COVID pandemic was not encouraging that we would see each other face to face for months to come. But we persevered. The doom and gloom of the demise of churches has given way to recognition of God's limitless grace and ways to show that to each other. We have modified how we worship, provide programming, and ways we show our love and advance our mission in the community several times this year based on the CRC's recommendations on how we can safely use our church facilities, be in person, and be safe. We now have regular Tuesday morning coffee. Our board meetings are in person in Fellowship Hall. Boy Scouts are meeting again. Community groups use our facilities. Committees meet here, and we are having fellowship coffee after church, right out here. We are guided by the wise decisions of those on our CRC and feel confident that that if we need to make additional changes, we are up to the challenge. Our youth groups are active and all follow our COVID guidelines. The sound of youth laughing and, yes, yelling is music to our ears. Under the guidance of our pastors and youth leaders, our children and youth are again enriching our church lives. We continue to be the go-to church for support of those who are struggling with life changes, food insecurity, and living arrangements. Mobile Food Pantry is such an awesome ministry that we continue to participate in. Warrior giving projects are never ending as the need is so great. Our church members volunteer and we open our church facilities to those who assist the needy with services. Our ELL program is without question a ministry which has and continues to touch so many lives. Our volunteers do not just show up once or twice a week to help teach English to those who are in the ELL program. They are friends to all and have become significant helplines for many other issues these students and their families have. We should all be proud of the support this church gave and will continue to give to support higher education for our ELL members and families. This is God's work, and we, Nora Christian Church, are the hands and voices of God in this work. This church has been guided over the years by the goals of welcoming all and sharing our faith through worship, fellowship, service, and education. That was no different this year, even as we continue to work through the challenges of the pandemic. Over the years, our goals have remained our guiding principles, but our ways of approaching and reaching those goals have changed with the changes of our church and members' needs, and the needs of our community and the world. We continue to strive to meet those goals this year, and will continue to work towards these goals in the future as we face new challenges and changes to our worship, outreach, fellowship, and education. As I close, I leave you with a few thoughts about the future of our church in a post-pandemic world. Make no mistake, to be viable and effective in the coming years, we will need to navigate the new normal, and that will include many cultural changes and acceptance of new ways of sharing and our message and providing service outside of our church building. I said this last year, and I'm going to say it again this year. Being the church will be as important as going to church. We must continue to stretch our comfort zone by balancing our inward focus and outward focus activities. We will continue to provide a hybrid model for participation. Virtual participation has brought many back to worship, some who were unable to attend in person before the pandemic. And now I think we have the voting results, right? Where are they?
We're adding in the absentee
Oh, they're
ballots.
adding them. Okay.
What?
Yes.
Listening to what you had to say, I think that needs to be said more than once a year. As the church called it, they accomplished. John, we don't brag about that. We just go on our business quietly. We ought to be proud of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
While they're counting, if I could have
You may.
Marty and I can have a moment of pastoral privilege.
Yeah.
Sally has been board chair for 2 years, 2 of the easiest years in the existence of our church. Oh, wait, no. She had no idea, nobody had any idea that we would have all that was ahead of us when she agreed, when Rick Elkin came to her and desperately said, we need you to be vice chair. And you know how persuasive Rick can be. And Sally said, absolutely. And then when we were debating as a board what we should do for the next year, the board decided, hoping that all the board would stay on for continuity because it had been a hard year and we didn't want to throw new people in. And she gracefully agreed to do it again. And so we have 24 roses for 24 months of service. No more after that, right? She will continue. She'll, of course, continue being vice chair and guide for Doug Pierce, who's stepping in, having not been vice chair, or not past chair, you won't be vice chair, and be his guide as well. But as you all know, this woman is kind and tough and fierce and gracious and loving. And I do not know how we would have done all this without you at the helm. And so we are blessed to have Sally, and we will continue to lean on her in multiple ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
We love you. And there are So our little set of tables, we normally have communion. I've scattered on the side. So there's 2 stands and then the little small communion table. They have cards on there. If you want to write a little note for Sally as you leave, there's 3 different cards. And the board got you a gift card because somebody said, well, I think Sally orders a lot of her crafting supplies online. So spend away. Thank you.
So that was the question. Okay, Mary Jo.
Yes, maybe Mary Jo was behind some of that too. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know if Larry is done with tallying or not.
Well, thank you all. My last message was going to be just to thank everybody for all the help over the last 2 years. Thank you. Okay, we have the official tally. As we always do with the officers, trustees, and youth representatives, we tally and we do not give specific numbers of if anybody was voted against or anything. That is, to me, the Christian way to do this. And, but we make sure that all have received the majority of votes necessary to be elected, and they have. The budget, there were 54 yeses, 10 no, and so that has, the budget has passed. Bylaws, 63 yeses, 0 noes, passed. Articles of incorporation, 63 yes, 0 noes. And bequest policy, 63 yes and 0 noes. Thank you all for everything that you have done. And there being no other business, pardon, I hear a motion to adjourn.
Somebody should move to destroy the ballots.
Yes, yes. So moved by Rick Elkin. Second. Those in favor to destroy the ballots? Aye. Opposed, the same? They will be destroyed. And a motion to adjourn? I heard it before, Richard. Second. Second. And those in favor, aye. Opposed, no. And I bet there's still some treats back there. Thank you all.
Thank you all.